Hi, everybody. It's Gigi Hyland, the Executive Director of the National Credit Union Foundations for another Field Notes episode. I am so excited to welcome Larry Middleman, who is the President and CEO of CU Business Group and a former Foundation board member, and Mark Ritter, who's the CEO of MBFS. Welcome, gentlemen. It's so great to have you join me today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So this topic is maybe for our viewers a little what might feel like kind of off the beaten track here, because these videos that we're doing talk about financial well-being and give examples of what credit unions can do to really think of additional ways to advance their member financial well-being. And both of you work in the member business lending arena. And what we're trying to do during this particular conversation is to really to kind of, I think, broaden credit unions' minds of what the possibilities are to advance member financial well-being in the context of business lending specifically. So let's start out kind of just with the basics. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about MBFS, what it is, what it does, and what you do specifically to support credit unions. So go right ahead.
Sure. MBFS is a 12-year-old organization. We're owned by retail credit unions and specifically serve the credit union industry. And we service a whole bunch of what I would call those traditional support services for credit unions, kind of the back office functions. We have underwriting services. We have documentation services. We service loans. We help with participations. But also kind of out on the street, we also have a team of lenders throughout the country that work with credit unions to originate loans. And we're also big advocates and supporters of SBA lending, as well as we've recently come up with a fintech lending subsidiary, New Direction Lending, that is specifically targeted towards the smallest of small business lendings to help them get the capital they need.
Interesting. Yeah, great. And Larry, with CU Business Group, you and I have known each other a long time. I remember when CU Business Group was first started by corporate credit unions. So maybe give the backstory on CU Business Group and how what you do either aligns or is different from what Mark just described.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gigi. And yes, it was a long time ago, 2002, actually, that we founded CU Business Group. So we've been around almost 20 years now. It's been a heck of a ride. We offer very similar types of support services to credit unions, as Mark described. CUBG is a nationwide credit union. We work with, or nationwide CUSO, excuse me. We work with about 600 credit unions all across the country. So providing all of the support services for business lending, whether it be real estate or lines of credit, small business type loans. Another area of focus of our CUSO that's a little different from others is an emphasis on the depository services. One thing I say is, not every business needs a loan today, but every business needs a good depository relationship today. So that kind of rounds out the relationship. And we also do a lot of education on sales, marketing, good interviewing skills, lots of different things like that credit unions need to successfully offer business services.
That's awesome. So how do you all then, in the context of what you just described, make the link to this idea of member business lending and what credit unions can do to improve the financial well-being of their members? How would you explain that link if you were talking, as we are now, to credit unions and what that means specifically? And Larry, why don't we go reverse order? So Larry, just go ahead and continue and keep rocking.
Sure, yeah, you bet. I think, one of the biggest challenges for small businesses is access to credit. So having programs like Mark will describe more of, I'm sure his New Direction makes it easier to apply. CUBG also has a fast track program, which is similar, focused on small, $100,000 or less, just the bread and butter of simple business lending out there. So access to that kind of credit is essential for businesses as they grow and expand. And, credit unions have not been known for business services until recently. And so just first of all, educating credit unions that we are an option as an industry is a big part of it. But I think also beyond bringing the basic, we can make you a loan. Well, that's good. But I think businesses need to understand when, why I may be told, no, we can't approve you for that loan. And here's why. In other words, the financial side of running a business is certainly not as easy as the business owner who knows, their product or their service. They may be a great landscaper. They make a great cup of coffee in their small little drive-through, that kind of thing. But understanding the whole financial side and having a team of experts available, I think is something that a credit union can really add a lot of value, making those kinds of services and knowledge available to credit unions to help around their perspective as they try to grow and have their business thrive. You need good financial management, you need good advice, legal, tax, all of those, human resources, all of those kind of things. So I think that's one place a credit union can supplement. Yes, we offer a loan. Well, that's fine, but how much of a loan do I need? And what type of a loan do I need? And how are loans structured? And all of those questions are education that business owners, I think, need to have, especially when they're starting out. They know their product, their service, but they may not know all the rest of the picture.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mark, how would you build on that in terms of how you see it, if you're defining that or describing it to your credit unions or to potential clients?
Sure. One of the things that people tend to forget is starting a business tends to be counter-cyclical to the economy. And a lot of the members who had difficulty over the past year, maybe they were downsized or their company shifted, coming out of recessions, coming out of more difficult times is when small businesses start. Those are the types of things that trigger your member to go and start that business. So to really to keep that relationship, to build that relationship, to have, you're here to help advance your members' financial life. Many of them now are taking that step to start a small business. Maybe it's just part-time now. Maybe they're going to expand very quickly. But this, when times are great, it's easy. Everybody will help a member who has great credit. Now is when people really need that extra helping hand because they are starting that business. They're looking for that next step in life. And you already have that nice relationship with them to keep it moving forward.
I love what you're saying because, I think sometimes when we think of credit unions serving small businesses, we think of the entity of the business versus the people behind the business. So both of you have described that so eloquently that, Mark, your point about it being counter-cyclical for members that either got downsized or whatever and said, okay, now's the time I'm going to start that bakery I've always wanted to start, or that florist shop or something, and that making that dream come true and then finding a place to try to turn to, like who do I turn to even help me remotely with the financial part of that equation. And Larry, I think that connects to what you said about the depository side of the house, because I can think of the small businesses I do business with here in Alexandria, Virginia, where I live, and so many of them that are now friends of mine. The vast majority of them do their business banking with banks. They've never, as we've talked about credit unions, they're like, I've never even thought about credit unions as a place to have like business banking. And that idea that, you start banking normally with savings, and it's kind of no different in a way for a business of where do I go to park my money and to be able to transact like I need to. So what have you seen, knowing the cycle that we're in with this worldwide pandemic and with the economic pressures on so many people, what have you seen over the past 11 months as you all have worked through the job of the QSO and your business line of the QSO? What are you actually seeing? So Mark, again, I'm going to start with you and then go to Larry.
Sure. What we're seeing for our small business members is you hate to say it's really been kind of that two-sector economy that you hear about. in that there are businesses that really have taken a hit. Maybe their costs have increased, they've been closed, and those are the toughest ones. But there's also been small businesses thrive and boom and take advantage, and their inherent business model has changed and they're expanding. And the tough part of the credit union and the QSO is typically, historically, we would say, give me your past few years' financials. And it was great. We looked at it and made some reasonable assumptions that things were very stable. Now, credit unions and QSOs are having to dig into what is happening in your business today. And that's a lot different level of analysis and thoroughness. And sometimes it's challenging because credit union staff can't get out to the business and see it. And it's much more virtualized than it has been in the past. So we're seeing a much more focus on how is your business doing today? And are you somebody that has taken a hit? Or are you somebody that very few businesses have stayed the same? Usually they've kind of diverted. So that's been the biggest challenge over the past year, is just kind of factoring that and getting credit unions to look at who is the business and what are they doing today, as opposed to give me your 2019 financials and we'll make a judgment on your financing request.
It's so interesting because I think of the most recent stimulus package that was approved, and for a lot of people, probably the most important thing that credit unions can do is help them, if they're eligible for the earned income tax credit, to really focus on that, and knowing that's a look back, because it's now allowed that you can look back to 2019, knowing 2020 was potentially a year of no income. And so this idea of focusing on the present for the business is so interesting, knowing that things have changed so dramatically and that a person's individual situation might be so different from what their business situation currently is. Larry, how do you think, what have you seen at CUBG in 2020, and sort of what have been some of the opportunities, challenges for credit unions in the
back in about March and April, we were talking about like a potential cliff we might be falling off of in terms of workouts and problem loans, and will the industry blow up with this severe economic downturn that we had? And as it's turned out, credit unions being more focused on commercial real estate, that has insulated them in a large way from a lot of those problems that we're reading about with restaurants, with hospitality, those kind of things. Those are spaces that credit unions tend not to seek out and really go after. So credit unions have had a better time than you might think by reading the headlines about the economy, that sort of thing. So, but again, I think like just for example, the PPP loan program, which is a great boost for businesses, there's a lot of complexity in that. You've got to make proper calculations. You've got to sign asserting that these are true and correct. And you've heard stories of fraud and other things like that. So there's lots of little ins and outs of just simply applying for a PPP loan. So when you look at larger credit unions that are trying to process hundreds, if not even thousands of PPP applications on top of managing their portfolio of commercial real estate loans and gathering current financials, as Mark said, we don't want 2018 and 19, we want 2020 through June, or as recently as you can give me. Just putting all that together as a business is a large challenge. And we haven't even talked about them actually running their business, and trying to stay open and serve customers and that sort of thing. So I think credit unions, this is opening credit unions' eyes to not necessarily being so commercial real estate focused. I mean, that's good. And it creates it's a small, you can do that with a small team. True small business lending is more difficult and more costly to do. But when you talk about truly helping your members at your credit union, that's what you need to do through Mark's New Direction program, CBG's Fast Track program. There's lots of ways that a credit union can tap into a true small business market without having to make a huge investment in staff, resource, technology, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's always the rub, as we know, obviously with the current limitation on business lending that exists in the Federal Credit Union Act, and credit unions, maybe seeing the opportunity with a variety of different members, but really looking at that cap and going, oh, I can't invest, I can't invest all that I need to in order to do the lending correctly and appropriately in accordance with the rules. How do you all respond to that, and sort of where do both of your CUSOs come into that equation, Larry? And I'm asking really because you and I have had conversations that really the credit unions are really leaning much more to commercial real estate, and that there's a real opportunity here to serve members in the context of smaller business loans. So how do you all answer that for credit unions? As credit unions are just like, yeah, I kind of don't know what to do, or how to balance how I run the credit union and how I do a business lending portfolio that may be now more geared towards smaller businesses. Mark, any thoughts on that?
Sure. I always say small business owners are just your members who need a little bit bigger credit box. And those small business owners, everybody is always after that elusive full service member. And small business owners, they have many times they need financing, but if they don't, they still have deposits. But the owners still have mortgages and they have personal deposits, and they generally will have employees that like credit union services. And sometimes they have 401ks or other retirement investments. When you check the box on the needs of that small business owner, it really wraps everything around the credit union movement and who we want to be in terms of that small business member.
Larry, that's great. Larry, how do you think about that, or how do you make that pitch to credit unions or help them understand the opportunity?
I think that it goes back to some of my earlier comments with a foundation of education. Education, not only for the business who needs to fully understand the picture of running a business, but education for credit unions. So if you are looking at or thinking about strategically thinking, we would love to roll out a small business program for our credit union members. Well, now are you talking branches? Are you talking call center? How far does that go in the credit union? And the farther it goes, the more education you need for branch staff or other credit union staff, just to understand the ins and outs of all the different types of business legal entities, the way that a commercial loan works compared to a consumer loan. So much of it is education oriented, I think. But the other thing that CUSOs like us are charged with is ideally handing a platform to a credit union that makes it fairly inexpensive to start with, because we're sharing costs across many credit unions. And yet I can get up and running quicker. I don't have to do so much of the work myself because I can tap into Mark's new direction, for example. So I think that's our charge, and there are lots of resources out there available for credit unions. And so we ask questions of the credit union management. What's your strategic direction? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Where do you want to be? And depending on the answers to that, you have different directions that you can go. And so having a CUSO or a service provider that can help you go in any of those directions, whether it be just small loans or just commercial real estate only, or I want to outsource everything. I want to do SBA. I don't want to do SBA. There's all kinds of options. So there needs to be flexibility, and credit unions come in many shapes and sizes. So providing that fundamental education of what are your options, how many forks in the road do you have, and which one fits for you guys the best.
It's almost the financial well-being first for the credit union. In a way, it's that education of starting with what do you really want to do here, and how do you want to do it, and then you get to the actual program, the small business lending program.
And
go ahead, please.
Well, the trick then is if you make that statement in the consumer world, credit unions are all over it. I mean, They know consumer services inside out. Senior management may not know commercial services all that well. So there's not just that instinct of we know what we're doing, we can progress. There's a learning curve from the CEO on down, oftentimes.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Do either one of you or do both of you have any kind of examples from last year in this idea in a credit union, and name names or not, but just sort of an example of how maybe a credit union, one of your clients, your members of your QSO actually sort of lived this out in the context of linking financial well-being with the work they were doing around business lending? Because, I think it's so helpful to share human examples because, we know 2020 was a pretty dark year for the most part. So just sharing sort of success stories and what might inspire other credit unions to spark ideas and to think about different things would be great. So Mark, any particular story that comes to mind?
Sure. I have a great one that I'll be telling for years.
Sure.
We did thousands of PPP loans here at MBFS. Mm-hmm. Our most successful PPP credit union in terms of units was a faith-based credit union from Georgia that had less than $200 million in assets. And they saw it as their mission to help out their members, who many of whom are small business owners. They have a large, but they made it a priority. It wasn't the large, huge, multi-billion-dollar credit union. It was a small credit union in Georgia who wanted to help out every single member they can. And they were one of the most successful in the country in terms of putting out units. Now, they didn't put out the dollars because they did a lot of small loans because that's who their members are. And the reason they did it is because it was a priority for the credit union and their management team to help out people. And sometimes credit unions get overwhelmed when they think about business lending. Business lending is a huge world. That can mean the smallest part-time landscaper or huge center city real estate. And there's a lot in between. But if you focus on that membership and meeting that needs of your membership and potential membership, credit unions don't like to say no to people, but it's okay to focus on segments and do really well. And people will understand you can't be everything to everybody. But, what is definitely a mid-sized credit union, I hear credit unions much larger than this say, oh, I don't know if we can do it. And this was one of the most successful credit unions we have, and they're a faith-based credit union from Georgia. So.
What a great example. That's fabulous. I love that combination of you can't be everything to everybody, and yet with a laser focus during a crisis of what you really want to be to your membership, and 150% on that, the success that brings, regardless of the amount of money of each of those PPP loans, because those I'm sure made incredible differences to every single one of those small business owners.
They were very impactful, and they have members for lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. You were there with me when I really needed you the most. That feeling, just like a consumer would feel that way when a credit union steps up and helps a consumer with something. Larry, how about you? Any stories that come to mind or any anecdotes that come to mind from last year that really sort of exemplify this link between financial well-being and business lending?
Well, yeah, the one story kind of follows in line with Mark's example there. We work with, hundreds of credit unions, so we see all shapes and sizes. And one thing that I think is really important as you are embarking in commercial services is understanding what your goals are, what your niches might be, where can you outdo the competition, where can you outdo banks that have been doing this for 1,000 years, and you're just a little old credit union in your community. One example of this that I thought is really relevant is a credit union that's primarily serves the Ukrainian community. So that's the common bond, is the Ukrainian ties. And what they have found as a niche, they have a number of members that have expanded their delivery business, which you can understand is very big today. And so they are financing delivery trucks, the kind of the Amazon van sort of thing that's probably 100,000 or less. And they are cranking them out. They have a field of membership all across the country. So they're cranking them out where their members are, which is all over. And it's been a very successful expansion for them. They're not overly concentrated in it. You don't want to have too much of one thing, but they're managing their concentrations well. But you talk about serving your membership and meeting your members' needs. They 2 years ago, they were not offering business vehicle services at all, lending services. Now they are, I would argue, one of the more active credit unions in that space of delivery type vehicles, and going crazy using our fast track program to get the cost. We handed them the platform, got the costs down to where it's manageable for them, and we can turn it quickly, and they can get an answer to their member within a day or two, which is what you need to do for those small loans. It's speed and reliability.
That's a great story, but just two very different stories, but two great stories that again sort of reflect this new reality of certainly, Larry, to your story, the delivery, the opportunity to work in a gig economy to start delivering things so that you can earn income, and then obviously the PPP loans to small businesses for businesses that are just trying to find a way to make it through kind of to the other side of this pandemic till we can all be together again. So those are great stories. And you can't help, as you tell those stories, you can't help but think of, at least I do, I think of the faces again of the small business owners that I know, the nail salon and the local bakery, and good people that have worked so hard to just even have a business, and just trying to fight their way through to get to the other side and be successful. So really good stuff. Anything else in the marketplace as you look forward into 2021 that you think would be useful for credit unions to know or to think about as you all think about what this year might bring in the small business lending arena? Mark, let's start with you.
Sure. As part of the most recent stimulus package, the government has made it more attractive than ever to help businesses out with SBA financing. They now can get 90% government guaranteed loans with no fees to the credit unions or to the borrowers. And that is sometimes, of all the segments of lending to get into, the most intimidating. And even for the largest credit unions in America, it's very difficult to pull that off internally, to build an infrastructure around it. But their members need the financing, and it's a great opportunity for the business community. So I really strongly encourage people. It's very daunting. It's not something you just want to kind of figure it out on your own, look for a good partner, but it's one of the top opportunities in the next 2 years for credit union business lending.
So, Larry, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo that SBA is really stepping up these days through the PPP and other programs. And that's a valuable resource that is easier to access now than it has been in the past. I think one of the things that is critical for businesses that they're finding out today is the need for capital, not only to grow your business, but just to maintain your business. We credit unions are so focused on capital ratios and all those kind of things. Businesses don't necessarily look at it that way. They're like, I want to plow everything back into the business. I need to buy more inventory. Well, what about managing your cash flow, and what about your safety net and your capital for when a pandemic might hit, to use an extreme example? And how much coverage do you have in the event of scenario planning? Your sales drop by 25%, your sales drop by 50%. What's your plan for that, and what are your financial resources backing that up? And hopefully it's not maxing out your credit cards, taking cash advances. So that planning for a worst case scenario or any negative scenario, I think, is critical for businesses to understand. And credit unions are in a great position to at least bring up those types of topics. The person sitting at the credit union desk may not be an expert and be able to advise them in that, but to help that person run their business better, they could make referrals to the SBA, to the local CDC offices that can provide some of those types of consulting and advisory services, tax accountants, all those types of things. So I think that's a critical component where credit unions can take a lead in pushing the member, especially maybe you don't qualify for this loan right now, but I want to help you qualify for this down the road. Here are ways that you need to improve your financial situation in order for you to come back and we do this deal.
Those are great examples. And I think so both profoundly linked to financial well-being, because as we said at the outset of this conversation, you can't silo the small business owner sort of over here as the business owner and then the person over here. And so what you all have both mentioned is this idea that, there's so much to think about as a small business owner. You have the passion to do whatever it is, the bakery or the nail salon or whatever, and that, but just all of the underpinnings of a business for that, including if you're a sole proprietor, what happens if you get COVID? Do you have insurance, and what happens? Do you have to shutter your shop for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, heaven forbid, longer? So just all of this interconnectivity between running the small business and all of the good business practices that people need to learn, but also then hopefully rely on a credit union to help them sort of navigate through all of that complexity and be able to go through those checklists in a way that they've planned and they have really control, kind of no matter what, knock on wood, no matter what might happen, including a worldwide pandemic. But good stuff. This has been a great conversation and so helpful to hear your examples and what you do for credit unions. Any kind of last word, Mark, on what you would advise credit unions for 2021? Any last word at all?
Oh, no, I would just say, continue to serve that membership, and many of which, I say they don't have business members. They just have members that own businesses. So, and then keep focusing on that and they'll be successful.
Awesome. That's great. How about you, Larry?
Yeah, I think we in credit unions in commercial services, because we are relatively new in this as an industry, we tend to think, oh, banks know this stuff inside out. They're so good and we're inferior. And that is totally not the case. I mean, the service on a front line in a branch of a commercial bank, when talking about commercial services, business services, is no better than what that person would get if they came into a credit union with just some fundamental knowledge about business services and what it takes to advise a business as they move forward. So there's banks they probably have a lot more products and services, and they can help the big corporations and all that. But when it comes down to those loans that are 100,000 or less, the bread and butter of credit union lending, it looks just like commercial loans, but consumer loans, but it's got to be restructured and redocumented and different things as a commercial loan. That's not a big jump for a credit union. So don't feel like it's so intimidating or how can we ever compete with the banks? Our industry is doing really well, has made great strides in the last 10 years especially, and we absolutely can do that as well as banks, and better because of just who we are. We're credit unions, we're doing it better.
There you go. Well, and also I think, let's not forget our history that credit unions really started out as business lenders. There were credit cards back in 1908 with St. Mary's Bank, or even in 1934. People were looking to start small businesses as they immigrated to this country, or they were looking to, leave the mill work they were doing and, open up a cobbler shop or whatever their area of expertise. So this really is in our DNA, even though obviously it's much more complex now than it ever was at the outset. But still, we're very fortunate in our credit union system to have credit union-owned service organizations in the form of both of your organizations to really be able to leverage the cooperative space and the cooperative principles to be able to come together and really help credit unions do even more in this space. So kudos to both of you in what you do and how you've been able in your own rights to advance this work for credit unions by offering them platforms that make it easier for them to do this type of lending. Well, thank you both for your time. Thanks for sharing your expertise. We will certainly share in the comments to the video the links to both of your websites and the resources, any other resources that you want to provide. But thanks for taking some time out of your day to be with me and have this conversation, and wish you all a very healthy and happy 2021.
Thank you, Gigi. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
You're so welcome. Thank you.